Fiesta en nuestra habitación.
¿Y esto cómo lo vamos a tomar?
Pues currando, ya está. Yo he echado mucho de menos a los niños.
Y ellos a ti también.
Yo en 2 semanas tengo un permiso. Son 2 días, pero si queréis aprovechar para hacer algo.
¿Qué pasa? ¿Me estás siguiendo o qué?
¿Yo? No, me estás siguiendo tú. Estáis todo el día aplaudiendo cada vez que entro. Porque somos los primeros hoy, ¿no?
Exacto.
Perdón. Gracias.
Vamos a empezar con la rueda de prensa.
Let's commence the press conference.
Eta ongi etorriak Donostia Zinemaliko prentsaurreko honetara.
Good morning, the press conference of the film festival. Welcome everyone to the press conference of Girasoles, silvestres, wildflowers. Let's introduce the people on the panel. For the press conference, from the right to left, Antonio Chavarrilla, the producer, Bárbara DIEZ, the screenplay writer and producer, Manolo Solo, actor, Luis Marqués, actor, ORIOL PLA, actor, JAIME Rosales, director, Ana Castillo, actress, QUIM AVILA, actor, Karina YUSTE, actress, and Adolfo BLANCO, distributor and producer. What a panel! I'm going to ask a first question and then we can open the floor to the journalists. I would like to ask Jaime, who wasn't in the official competition in San Sebastian since 2008, albeit his films like A Bullet in the Head, like he's been in different sections made in Spain in Pearls. What's it like to come back to the official section of San Sebastian with Wildflowers? Well, I'm very excited to be here. I always feel very comfortable in the San Sebastian Film Festival. The festival, I think, is an excellent platform, I believe, to help films and also to take the temperature of how the first audience reacts, albeit it's a professional audience. It's always an audience which is a bit specific, but also see how the press reacts, and also it's a great honor and it's a privilege, and I'm very thankful for you giving me this opportunity. Hi, good morning. Over here. First of all, thanks for the film, congratulations. I would like to ask you about how you chose the cast. How was the casting process? And then I'd like to know also whether there was a certain degree of improvisation in the scenes, or whether everything was rehearsed, or how was the process of those those films that were so powerful in the film. I can answer the first part of the question, and any of the actors can answer what the work was like. For the casting, I commenced, and as I've done in the last few films, choosing an anchor actor, as an actor with whom I've already worked with, and enables me to test the new incorporations to see how they work with the techniques that I feel comfortable working with. The anchor actor was this gentleman on my right, who had worked with me in Petra, and logically, I was quite impressed with how he worked, despite the fact that he wasn't too old, and he's a very young actor, much younger compared to me, that is to say, and he worked very, very well. And all of a sudden I thought that perhaps he could be the character for a perfect character for Oscar, and he could be the anchor actor. And then with the rest of the cast, I started to meet them slowly but surely, and the first meeting with Anna was quite impressive because she already showed that freshness and that how natural she was, and I realized that she had a wide range, because in a scene that we rehearsed, she went from joy to a situation of tension very quickly, and that's we incorporated everybody else in the cast, and we tested it with Oriol, and here I am, and I can't be happier of the cast that we've prepared for the film. Anyone can answer what the technique was like or how we improvised.
Hola.
Hi.
Pues
Well, if I seem to recall that we did have some rehearsals. I rehearsed for a week with each of the boys, and upon the script we saw different scenes, and we started to construct them. New things appeared and emerged. Jaime has a way of working which is quite interesting, in which all of a sudden you read the scene, then you don't read it, then you improvise, then you go back to the text. And through those rehearsals, what we did, we created the sequences, and then when we shot the film, there was a certain margin, but we were already prepared from everything that we'd been working on beforehand. Yes, I'm going to say something, and then we'll give the floor to Oriol. For example, in part of the rehearsal process, that halfway through I decided to film little sections, but then was Barbara. We saw it with Barbara later on, and Barbara said something that I believe that, albeit I did feel it, but it's very good for someone to tell you this nevertheless. I think they're all quite good in how they're portraying the roles, but nevertheless I think Oriol, who's really good, and he's doing a great, he's not the character, and that was a point of alarm for me, and that was set the alarm lights on, and Oriol, I said, well, listen, we've got to do something a bit more. We've got to work on something a bit more. We've got to take the character in another direction. And there were several days, and there was a certain tension or insecurity or a certain fear between them both. I always tried to convey a lot of confidence and trust. I said, you're going to find the character. But the truth is, I was thinking, I have no idea whether we're going to achieve what we're doing, but you always got to try to tell your actors that you fully trust myself and your actors as well when you're a sea of doubt. Nevertheless, Oriol, you want to add something? Well, it's a great presentation. Thank you very much for this. After this horrible moment in my life, what you've just said, well, the truth is, what do you want me to say? Well, Jaime works from a place which is a really beautiful, and in Petra he told me, the character, I bring the character to the actor, not the actor to the character. He's got a very clinical eye. It's like a scalpel, but I was with Petra. He doesn't give you the script. That's a script, but put it away. And we started to rehearse with Brenda Moore, and I remember that's when I most listened to an actor, and that I got into a scene, because he leaves you without text, the tools of the text, and you've got to make the scene with the other person, and he knows how to create the tension between actors very well, and he wants you to work from where you are, who you are. He doesn't want you to construct anything. And in this character, we said, well, okay, we have to construct the character. I said, of course, Jaime, but I know what we're trying to find is very complicated. We've got to go very far, but without giving in to working from that position. So we had to do a very slow work, and it generated a bit of anxiety for us. Yes, it did. Yeah, we could notice it. We noticed it in you as well. But they give the opportunity from tension. It's not a good place to start, but from relaxed and listening and persistence, we are able to achieve it. And in the rehearse, I broke a table. I said, okay, so we've got it. We've managed to achieve it. And then I remember, in the rehearsals, it's the only film where I felt afraid of someone. I remember when we were rehearsing, I don't know whether, with Luis, I know that when Luis felt it, because all of a sudden I try to make it to show when there's a problem that there's no problem, and you can probably notice it nevertheless. But it was a scene that we had rehearsed with Luis, and it was his confrontation, and Luis also had to confront her, and Oriol got involved of the actors that they get, right into their characters, and he got very powerfully, he got very strong, and I thought, oh my God, and he was very angry, but he lost the plot, and I said, I don't know how you felt it, but I felt that he could hit you. If I've got him in the middle, he could hit me as well in that scene. The fact is, this never happened to me. It was quite unpleasant. And then in the rest of the shoot, no, he's a really nice guy. He's a really nice guy, don't worry. How did you live that, Luis? Well, let's see. It's true that was quite heavy. I thought, this is serious. But just after the scene, he gave me a hug, he gave me a kiss, and I said, I'm sorry. I said, don't worry, no worries, everyone's okay. But yes, you got a way of working which is he gets right into his characters, and there are moments where, and it made you a little afraid of him. And I remember there was also, you remember, Anna, Oriol started to cry. I said, stop talking about me, I'm getting sick of it. That's the first time in the official section, and made him cry because there was a scene after the fight, and he was leaving Anna's life from the mindset of the character, and he was leaving the film, and he started to cry a lot. I've never seen anyone cry so much in that situation, but I think these are things that are good. Yes, it is true. But I'm laughing, but I'm joking. But nevertheless, the link that we established with Anna, we understood ourselves very well from the outset. From the first minute, our language was very similar. And most of the scenes are improvised. The ones that we have, perhaps most complicated, which is the end one, where there's that final problem. I knew Anna was going to respond no matter how much I improvised. And wherever she was improvising, it allowed me, I know where she was going, so we invented. It allowed us, and Jaime allowed us, to take whichever meander was necessary to fall into the main river of, it was an open improvisation, but the limits were very clear. They said, we're not going to go too far. We know how far we've got to go, Anna and I. As actors, from a drama point of view, it was quite clear to us which way to not get lost, and we avoid not getting lost. And this means that things that are very beautiful take place in the scenes, because you allow this as well, Jaime as well. See how good I had talk about you and not you about me? Because he wants me to hire him again for another film, but I will do that. Oh, well, let's do that. Great. Hi, congratulations for the film. My questions for the director, the truth is for whoever wants to answer. What surprised me in the film is that the protagonist doesn't fall into which I see a lot in other films, related to maltreatment, for example. She grows, she isolates. This doesn't exist, or abuse. When there's abuse or any problems, they call the police and that's it, and we go move on to another thing. And that's very important because it teaches us that that's a possibility to be able to do this. I'd like to know whether this was the idea in the script was always like that, of the abuse, or whether that changed. One of the things that I've learned, one of the big things that I've learned, important things that I've learned in this film, is that when someone asked me, in the shoot, which had to do with the camera or whatever, how do we do this and shoot this, I always said, how would you do it? And that always gave me a good answer from the person who was behind the camera. That way of not doing things and taking advantage that anyone can answer this, so that Barbara can answer this question as well. Well, that is there from the outset. It's intentional. I think it has a lot to do with the ellipses. And it's so marked ellipses that there are strong leaps and jumps. And sometimes you get lost, things that you lose and you don't see. And it leaves everything into your mind. And what happens exactly after that? When she calls the cops, the other moments, you don't know exactly what she's done. All of a sudden she jumps in the bus, but there's a times there that you have to imagine as a spectator. And I think that those ellipses leave some space. Don't you think? Yes. What was very important for me also was to avoid victimism of the character, because I think that was what your remark was about. I think that the Julia's character is a very strong character. It's a character who's very resistant to the difficulties that she encounters in her life, but every time she's hit, instead of feeling like a victim, she's immediately seeking for a new solution. That new solution, like for example, going to Melilla, can be, it might be a mistake or a partial mistake, because that doesn't end up being something good, but it's something that she's constantly decides and she wants to do. She's a very active character, and I think she's a very intelligent character because she learns. See, at the end of the film, we would have seen that the film ends with a man who's similar to the first man, who's a man who's of a type almost archaic. He's like from another period in time. If she'd have done that, I imagine she would have showed a lack of intelligence. But the fact that she finds a man she searches for a man who's not the right one. He's more feminist or much more modern, who has integrated the importance that in his life, that he can contribute, that you can see he's going to take care of the children and probably will contribute to working, to the household chores, and creates a space in his time to take her along with him and to receive help from her. That type of man, who's a man that Luis portrays, I think is a man who's more modern than what we can say than Oscar's character. Does that mean that not Oscars in the world? There are Oscars. They're full of Oscars. The world's full of Oscars. But women, for example, it's very attractive. I've got friends who are a bit like that, and that, you know, they always get women. But those men who are ethically more normal, shall we say, we've always picked up girls much less. But that transit, shall we say, in the long term, I think that it's that kind of man who can set up a family, who's got the faculty to set up a family, ability, and who takes the girl at the end of the day. It's as Hollywood as that. He takes the girl at the end of the day. And I remember, it's what I was saying, that Oriol, it was a big problem for him, and there were days when Yus came along. I said, well, okay. They did talk to each other at the end of the scenes, but at the end of the day, he's going to leave. He takes her. I got very angry. Yes, I got very angry. Quite curiously, that day, that rehearsal that we're talking about, that seemed very violent. It was very cool because we found the reality of that character and his reaction, which is a violent reaction, but it was quite curiously, in the world of that jealousy, disorbited, and those hyperbolic images, this guy is going to pick her up, and that's where we found that pain all of a sudden, that he reacts as if, what does this mean? And quite curiously, in those two extremes, and there was something which was a lot of fun, and I thought it a lot of fun and very comical, and that is to say, Oriol was so stuck into his character, which was very, he was, no, he's not like he is now. It was like a thug, for example. He says, I know that. Hey, listen, don't give me a hard time. I know exactly what you're saying. So that's how he said things. And he was stuck into his camera, and the people on set was, no, they're actors. That's what they do. Hi, congratulations. The film is a sensorial, powerful sensorial experience. What's the anchor idea, Jaime, of the film? And it's a catalogue of different masculine characters, which has a lot to do with what's political. I think the social class, the bourgeois person who has become much more feminine. It's a much weaker masculine sort of side to the character. And then Anna, I think her character is brutal, shall we say, quite a savage interpretation or portrayal. How do you see maternity in your time? Because those young mothers that are from the outskirts of a city. What contact have you had, or what idea do you have of these mothers? Where did you nourish? Where did you? Can I answer that? Where did you know? Where did you get the ideas for your character? Can I answer first? Yes. How do I see maternity? Well, I think there's part of the character which I felt very close to me. Mothers which have an absolute mental burden, mothers that want to go forge ahead because of their children, mothers that leave their needs, their desires, because they're alone and they've got to forge ahead. They're fighters. Mothers who are very young girls who live in a very patriarchal system, who have very toxic communities around them, and they don't know anything, and they sail and navigate whichever way they with very complicated seas. So therefore, I'm from that suburb. We shot in Obarris, where I grew up, in that neighborhood in Barcelona. And there's something I've always felt, that women in my family, women that I know, mothers who are very young and who work and bring up their children. Maternity in my time and now, for the last 5 years, I'm understanding maternity, which is much more feminist, but I'm understanding it now. I didn't grow up that way, thinking that. It's a deconstruction at this present moment, what I'm going through. It's a process. I don't know what to say. The part of the question that, for me, I was interested in, it was to show, first of all, that through our sentimental lives, we've had very different types of partners. Those partners, different types of partners, have got to do with our need to learn, albeit we don't talk about it, we talk about the learning of a profession, but there's also learning in love. There's also that learning process. We do it through our experience, like all other learning processes. We do it with things and people who are different. Perhaps there's a moment where there's a type of person that can attract us a lot, and we'll draw conclusions from that person. Something failed, we'll look for another type of person. And that variation, that's what I was interested in. I was also interested in these three typologies, these three psychologies associated to those types of men. There's a man who was, I said before, who was more primitive, and then there's a man in the middle who, in certain aspects, he's a bit more involved than the previous man, but he's at a moment or a point in time that he's not being able to assume responsibilities. He tries it sincerely, and for her it's not enough either. And then finally, there's a man who I believe is the much more feminist or more modern, much more evolved man, and he does undertake these responsibilities and also the consequences. Well, yes, isn't he? A bit more, but a bit more, not completely. And another one of the ideas that I was interested in exploring, which vis-a-vis relations, was generally relations when they start falling in love. The dynamics is we're going to each other. It's finding the center, shall we say. We're trying that in that love, falling in love process. There's a moment in which that dynamics stops, and in many cases, what they start, there's a dynamic which is centrifugal, and it brings about a lot of insecurity and separation. I'm convinced that centrifuge dynamics for a relationship to prolong in time, extend over time, one of the two has to take a step forward. And that step forward is not easy, because once we're saying, well, I'm giving everything I have, and then that's never enough. And the other character, the same thing is happening to the other person. And so we start to distance ourselves. And I thought it was very beautiful in this story of different types of masculinity, and from the point of view of a woman, that step should be given by a character who was a man, or masculine character. Everything with this, it seems it's going to break down. He stops, and he thinks, and he takes a step forward. She takes that and generates, as of that moment, a dynamic which is centipede again. So therefore, these ideas that rotate along the family, the children, how to incorporate children into a relationship, and then I think that everyone in films, they're beautiful when each person can associate part of their biography in them. There's part of the biography of a person that perhaps I recognize this that's happened to me, and seen on the screen, it allows me to reflect in a very critical way. That's what's always interested me. Hi, here, congratulations to everyone. I love the film. And I was just thinking about the same thing. I feel very identified with the story and Anna's character. Oriol made me afraid. I thought that character was going to emerge at any time later on in the film. But I wanted to ask you, the character of the father, what draws my attention is that position of not intervening, almost passiveness from what his daughter's suffering, which it's very thankful that he doesn't have that pressure. But that drew my attention. I'd like to know more about that. Thank you. Manolo. Yes, that drew my attention as well. How, as spectator, I haven't seen the film, by the way, excuse me, I've read the script. I don't know exactly what are the keys where that passiveness starts and that non-intervening starts, but I can make my own composition of the situation. Jaime is a director that allows to tell you, he doesn't tell you exactly or marks exactly, at least in my case, what's the background of the character. In fact, in the rehearsals, especially with Anna and with Carolina, with my two daughters, from a different mother each, that's the information that I had. Each were from a different mother. They helped me very much to know which way to go. And as Oriol said before, what part of me I could introduce into the character, what energy from me I could put into my character, and then to also to be with my colleagues, both of the women, and the return what I received from them when I acted in the scenes. But I have my assumptions about what scars that this man has from his previous relationships, where he doesn't dare to pontify or give a sermon, nor give advice or to tell them what they have to do. He's blocked, obviously. I think she knows more about the character than me. Basically, we constructed the father's character who's always there. That is he allows you to follow your path, but no matter what you decide or what you do, he's always going to support you. He's going to back you up in everything you decide upon. So therefore, we want to reinforce this. Yes, they also told me that. That was very clear. I forgot to say that. That's the way it goes, more or less. More than it wasn't a sermon type of giving a sermon type of father. They said, you're an intelligent girl, you're a mother, you know what you've got to do. Whichever way you go, where you fall down or get up, I'll always be there. And I think that's where it's being constructed. The character was constructed from. Hi, good morning. Something curious. Why so many tattoos? What's that got to do with it? Tattoos. Well, it's true. Good question. At a given moment, there were more tattoos, and we started to take away. Yes, there were a few more tattoos. I'd seen some characters, different characters. I generally like to work observing reality. Almost always the questions about why about something is because I've seen it or I've observed this. And beyond an intention which was not realistic. But when I was looking and researching and looking at photos about the characters, I realized that the type of tattoos and the character that was good for Oscar, it was a type of tattoo which was almost from a prison. And it's like Manolo says, I don't work with the actors on the background, but there is a version of the script in which he was in jail or in prison, and there's a sequence in which even the sisters were talking about he was going to leave prison, and from prison he'd already got in touch with her. And that explains the background of the character, which is a bit elliptical at the end, but for me justified that. And then military, well, the military in Melilla, they use different types of tattoos which are more not like a prison type, it's much more beautiful, the tattoo, and it's not throughout all over the body. And then we're saying that perhaps there are people that don't have tattoos and there are soldiers that are not tattooed. And the third, I thought it was much clearer that he was a man that didn't have a tattoo, the third man, third character. You try to tell the story from using all of the resources that films, resources from a dramatic standard point of view. Then wardrobe, we've seen an evolve, how Julia's character with how wardrobe from the beginning, how she evolves, that transition to a certain maturity is a wardrobe that also takes that journey. And I think in those typologies of characters also, the tattoos were also telling a story. That person who's a toxic person, don't be offended if you're tattooed, by the way, but it's also marked by the tattoos, whereas the person who's much more ethical at the end, not so much. So therefore, answering your question is above all because of reality, but there's also a part of the dramatical side of things which enabled us to tell the story with the tattoos. We have questions for two more questions. I'm going to give you the floor as I've seen you. Raise your hand. Hi, good morning. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all of the people that have participated in the film, from the soldier to the leader. Executive producers were students, production students. We come from Malaga. We would like to make these types of films. I liked it very much. And I'd like to ask two very quick questions. The first is, as regards production and direction, quite often the American films, the producer has a lot of power upon the final decision on the film and upon the idea of the film. I'd like to know, the director, what freedom you've had and whether you've taken the film as you thought you were going to take it. And the second question, which is important for me, as regards to the relationships, do you believe it'd be good for partners and couples should come and see these films, and then the message that you're transmitting, conveying is stability, and we have to mold each other? Adolfo's here as well. Let's take advantage of this fact. Who can answer the part, how he's felt the work was of producer and director, and Antonio's also there, and Barbara's here. Let's take advantage of the fact that they're here so that they can answer, and then I'll answer your second question. The other day I was telling Jaime, the day he turned up to Contracorriente, to our production company, he said I had a film and he would like for us to participate and we could premiere it. He drew a picture. He told me the story, or he told Manuela and myself, he told us the story by drawing a picture which I've kept, and the drawing, or the picture, is not the film. I think that from that drawing, where there was going back in time, things that happened but there was no way out. It was another story. It was the same story, but there were nuances which we talked about subsequently, and I think that Manuel, Fernando have talked a lot with Barbara and Angels and Juan Antonio and everyone, and Jaime we found who's a person who's very humble, receptive, with an enormous talent. It was a marvel to work with him. And also, if you insinuated and said something like, oh, gee, and he would take a step back. Yes, it's been great from a production standpoint. It's been a journey, as I say, a journey that we've been able to go along with Jaime, which was a real a masterclass of a director. What he wants is to make a film for the audience, and so therefore it's completely permeable to whatever we said. The film is absolutely his, but I can tell you it's very different from the film than he initially had in his head. That's right. And as regards to answer the question, which I think is important, is whether, for me, it would be recommendable or desirable that partners should go and see the film, and couples, yes, the younger the better, I think, the truth be said, because I think I'd like to think that the film contains the idea that there's learning in love, and I said before, there are things or people who can be super attractive, who can apparently in appearance have this, and then the idea that that person, you're going to be able to reform that person, but also realize that perhaps that's not the case so much, and that character who is a bit more mature or much more responsible later on has also a great attraction, because he will give you a much more pleasant life. And that learning process is going from a romantic stage to a more ethical and adult stage. I think this is important because it has a bit of melancholy. It says, well, okay, the character, Anna's character, when she breaks up the relationship at the end, when she's crying, she's not crying because of the damage of being kicked around or beaten, and she asks about him because, where is he? What are they going to do with him? Because leaving that and breaking with that is very painful, but at the end of the day, in her case, and in many cases, this is necessary. I would love young peoples and young couples to go and see it. I'd love to reflect upon that and to learn and to carry out that learning process. Last question. Over here. Congratulations, Jaime, for the film and the whole cast and crew. And to starting with Triana, the first song, which is going to explain a lot about the contents of the film. And that it proposes me, it fits me right into the film, but jokes aside, now the educational center, there are young girls who support the jealousy of boys as something positive, as the way of showing love and kindness. Have you thought about taking these people to young people, because you're talking about young couples, the teaching at schools? Are you going to make any sort of write something about this? And Carolina makes you feel relaxed with phrases, which sentences which are very brilliant and very determined. Carolina, take advantage of the fact that we have you here so that you can talk about this issue. I'm a big fan of Triana, the group, first of all. Yes, I think that obviously all films or any work, culture, art, or whatever, music, for that young people can learn to relate to each other from a healthy and a loving standpoint is great. And I think this is what happens. There exists that range that we're talking about of how the characters learn and how Anna's character starts to know what place that she wants to be in. I've got a sister who's 14 years old, and I think about this, and I've got a brother who's lived through adolescence, and he's now 21, and he tells me how they relate to each other. And I think this is important to show them or give them the tools, because quite often it's because they don't have the tools and because their references are horrible. And these has always been the case. We learn from where we come from, obviously. I'm very in favor of having healthy references for young people when they relate to each other. And vis-a-vis the relationship with my sister, it was cool what we were talking about. It happens like with my father. We're not interventionists, but we know exactly, she knows her sister very well. And plus there's something like, she's got to get hurt herself, and I'll be here to receive her and take care of her whenever she needs to. We've asked a little more for a last question. Great, thank you very much. It was very clear how Oriol accepted his role and how he got into his role, but we've got LLUÍS and QUIM, who are the ones that close the arc there, and I'd like to know, how did you incorporate yourself? Where was like getting beaten or hit, or what were your roles like in that arc that Jaime was talking about? And the truth is, you're all marvelous. I love the film, and thank you very much for the end of the film, by the way. Thank you. I remember the day I met Jaime when I was doing my audition. He said the truth. I remember you came for the casting for Petro. You didn't fit in then. You don't fit in now either. And I said, well, that's it. Well, what do we do? He said, well, let's do the audition, but you don't fit in any of the characters. I'm looking for someone who's different. So then we did the audition, and I called Beatriz, my representative, and I said, well, okay, this is not going to be clear. This is it's clear as day. And after 3 or 4 weeks, we received a call that at the end of the day, Mr. Jaime Rosales decided that, yes, the only thing I needed, I had to put on some weight to find an image was a bit more rude, shall we say. And then working, it was a pleasure with my colleagues like Anna. It was a pleasure. And what I would like to highlight from him is a person that doesn't leave you alone at any time. He always concerned that the prior preparation has got to be really tight so that when you're on scene, there are no loose ends. For example, as there was a lot of improvisation, what he regulates is the type of language that you use. He knew that my language, the way I communicate, didn't fit into the character very well. So for it limited me quite a lot, and he said, how do you feel? Not me, the character. I said, well, Jesus, no. How do you feel? Well, bad, that's better. How do you feel? I don't know. Perfect, that's the action. I said, okay, I understand what he wants. But it was a pleasure. And Anna, what can I say? Not much more to say than we said. It's a pleasure, as always, working with her and with the guys, as you say, who are fantastic in the film as well. Luis, you want to say something? Through the casting process, which was quite peculiar and the most honest that I've ever done in my life, by him, because of him. And the truth is, at the beginning, when we came to rehearsals, we came to a place, it was a way of working that I wasn't used to, and it was it was a pleasure. And just like Oriol and QUIM, from improvisation from oneself, but without being yourself and trying to find the similarities and differences that you have the characters, in this case with Alex. It is true that during improvisation, when you start from yourself, all of a sudden it's something that you know almost. And Jaime was quite clear. He said, no, Alex wouldn't react like that. Alex would do this, that, and the other. And so we constructed the character through those days in rehearsal. Having Anna next to me, I love you all very much. It was very heavy having her with us, because for me, I came to the project, I remember Jaime on the first day, he said to me, relax, you're going to be Alex, you're Alex, make him your own, because I was concerned. I admire this man, I've seen his films, and all of a sudden I said, okay, I'm in a project which freaks me out, a story which I love with a director who I admire, and I'm going, I was a bit nervous, you know what I mean? And he said, relax. And from then, hand in hand, and we forged forward. And Anna, she's so talented, she's very powerful. This woman is very powerful. She makes you feel relaxed when you're working with a woman like this. And to what we were talking about before, about the relationships and how Alex, at the end of the day, ends up giving her space and the calm that Julio was looking for. For me, it's also important to reflect upon sometimes in films Toxic relationships are made too romantic, and this happens quite a lot in this film. All of a sudden you go, gee, I'm very thankful for it. As you said, Anna, she doesn't stop. She moves on. And I think my mother always said, and I love, she said once to me, the important thing is that you not to be loved a lot, but to be loved well. And Oscar loves her a lot, but he doesn't know how to do so. And I think that the beautiful thing is to be loved well. I think this summarizes very well the end and what we wanted to tell by the story. Thank you very much. And I hope you can back us up and support us. Thank you.